in there that helps to work in between. Optimally, I've been talking with you all, but optimally I would have hung this up and took the head off really quickly, and that helps blood drain out of the meat. It's generally preferable from a culinary perspective. From a nutritional perspective, it's blood. We have blood. We're made of the same things. It's good for us. So it's not a bad thing if you don't drain all the blood out. It's not going to kill you. It's actually rather good for you. So I'm using a filleting knife. This is what, like a 3-inch filleting knife. It's really, really sharp. Really sharp knives are easy to work with. They make the whole process go much quicker. I just set this up yesterday. This isn't the normal spot that I butcher the rabbits. Because they're right next to the rabbits, I tend to do it over in a vermicide structure. So, but again, it only took me about 5 minutes. I set this up. I just lashed this on there, put a nail in it.
Why use this to make get the bucket under there and level?
Sure. Yeah. Put a little bit inside there. That might be.
I wasn't sure where it's going.
Just trying to get it to stand up more straight.
Here's another one, Andrew.
I think that'll be fine. I just want to be able to catch any blood that comes out. And so I'm going to go to the very first vertebrae because I want to save as much meat as possible. And I'm going to just cut. That's a big blood clot. I want to save as much skin, as much blood, or meat and skin as possible on the main body of the rabbit. I can also then take the 4 legs off. So that involves opening it up, finding the joint, cutting the meat and the tendons away from it. And then with rabbits, because they're small, you can just break a joint. That's called the break joint. For that reason, even on relatively large animals, when you remove the tendons and the meat, you can still break it with your hand. Right. So you do that. The kids right there.
I think they're oblivious.
This isn't really a rabbit anymore for the child, probably.
Actually, they think it's a bunny.
Oh, right. I think they're looking at those bunnies.
So,
Oh,
this is that. You can also just remove the tail coming up and cutting along the first vertebrae. And the tail just relatively easily. The next process that I do is cutting around the anus and cutting along the legs and down to the anus on the inside of the leg. That gets the best quality hide. You get the flattest, sort of squarish thing. And this is true for any animal that has 4 legs. If you're wanting to preserve the hide, you want to cut along the inside of the leg. Usually there's a transition of the hair. You know, it changes directions and quality. So you cut along that on the back end to the anus and you get it opens up nicely. So that's a rule of thumb. Sometimes it's harder than others. Like I butchered a pig last week and it was hard for me to tell like where I'm supposed to cut on the back leg because they're shaped a little bit differently. The legs are squat. So I'm just going to cut just the skin if I can. Just the skin. You know, with a sharp knife it's easy to cut into the tendons and the muscle around this area. It's better if you don't cut the Achilles tendon because when you're pulling on the animal, it tends to give some springiness to it. When you cut it, when you pull it, you can like pull the leg off potentially if you're pulling really hard.
The meat will come off the bone with the hide.
Yeah. All sorts of things can happen. Right. So find the butt and basically draw a line with the knife. Cut it open. And With bunnies, for the most part, you can just tear the skin. It's getting hot now, so this bunny is shedding hair. So when I pull and grab the hair, it tends to just pull out. So that's not so optimal. It's better to butcher them in the fall when their hides are thickest and most firmly attached. If you're wanting the fur. If you're just wanting the leather, it doesn't matter because you're going to tear it. So.
I was amazed at how fast the blood clotted.
It is, yeah.
But I guess there was a big injury on that site.
And there's a lot of blood flow.
Mm-hmm.
So for the most part, the rabbits, right, you can just pull the hide off. You don't need anything super special. So usually I come through here, and I'll take the knife, and I'll just come straight upward, bypassing the genitals. I mean, not cutting into the genitals, but going before I get to it. So that gives that a nice openness. And then I can do the same thing over here. And that basically leaves a little bit of fur right around the anus and whatnot. But that's fine. It's not very useful leather anyway, and it's at the edges. So I cut along the back of the tail and in the front of the genitals, so you have a nice tube. And from there, just pull it off.
So you don't make a cut down the front line?
Yeah.
So obviously, I was pulling too hard, or I made some sort of nick into the wall. So I'll just be careful not to stress that too much. I can use my hand at the site as opposed to pulling in the whole animal.
There was a question about keeping the hide as a tube versus opening it up down this belly.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to take it off as a tube, bunnies. You can always cut it open if that's what you want later.
Okay, so you don't really necessarily need to lay it flat when you're tanning it or anything.
Not necessarily.
Like that? Okay.
There's lots of ways to tan. Whatever works for you. I use stretching forms for the rabbits, or I have been using that lately. And they need to be in a tube in order for that to work. But you could also just take a piece of plywood or something and tack it on there, stretch it, tack it, and that would be fine. That's a very common way to do it as well. Because I have to be really gentle, because if I continue to pull, I'm just going to pull this whole thing off. All the guts out. Usually with any animal, just like us, the skin right on the breastbone is right up against, there's a lot of connective tissue there. So sometimes you have to cut there. But any of this connective tissue, just kind of, you can put your fist in it, and that helps, particularly on animals that are much larger than a rabbit. You know, really like pushing with your fist is helpful. I try to use the knife as little as possible because I'm trying to preserve the hide, and every time you get a nick in it, it's just like, you have to sew it and you have to be careful about it, so it's easier to just do it with your hands. Maybe it takes a little bit longer. You ultimately save time on the tanning end of things.
What do you guys use the hides for?
At this point, I just learned to tan them. I'm not really do a whole lot with the hides after they're tanned.
There's an example of a glove that Juana made that's on the table in the event barn with the fur on the inside.
I could theorize that bunny hides would be really great for underclothing in the winter time.
Hats.
They're nice and soft and flexible and thin, easily breathable. So that's all good qualities for stuff that's right next to your skin. If you took the hair off and you buckskinned it, got it nice and soft and supple, You could use it as t-shirt material. You could use it as bra material, as underwear. So those are all potential uses.
Ruben, can you take the?
Yeah, you just want to set it on that rod. And that's something that we'll be working with in the tanning workshop. I'll show you little things about that. So now we have a bunny, right? That's pretty much skinned. There's a little bit more skin here that will be cut off, taken out later. So right now I'm cutting along the belly and I'm butterflying open so I can get to the internal organs and pull them out essentially. With the knife again, I'm keeping the blade away from the organs because I don't want to cut like the stomach open because then like nasty juices come out. That juice isn't stomach juice that just came out, but there's fluids that are naturally occurring in the inner cavity of the animal. So those juices are there. Coming out. It's mostly water. So one of the trickier parts of this is making sure that you don't rip the colon and the bladder open and get urine on stuff, but that's gross. No one wants urine on the food. So it's important to, so like the anus and the colon and all the reproductive organs come through the same hole in the pelvis, right? So it goes through the pelvis and it comes out here. So you can use your hand to break the connective tissue there. You can also use a knife if you're very careful. But again, you know, knives cut things and you don't necessarily want to cut it open. Whereas your finger is a much gentler tool. Your hand is a much gentler tool. And so I'm just cutting this connective tissue so that all of these reproductive organs and all that stuff can flow and move freely. So there's the tail. So now it's free, right? So that means I can pull it through. And then if I'm wanting to save the liver, there's the liver, part of it, one lobe of the liver. Is that a healthy liver?
Yes, it is.
Excellent. That's like 1/3 of the liver.
Says the liver researcher.
Yes. How many, you probably don't know this, how the rabbit liver, how many lobes does it
3.
have? 3. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's more human.
It's like a, yeah. So we can keep that for tanning. The part of we talk about like brain tanning, right? Well, the brain isn't necessarily tanning it, but the brains are used to lubricate the hide because the brains readily dissolve in water. They emulsify. So they're fatty acids that readily emulsify in water. That's why brains are so great. But if you use any fat and emulsifier, you can do the exact same thing. You can also use liver to tan the hide because it has readily emulsifiable fatty acids in it. It's not the same as brain. You need a little bit more of it per volume, a larger amount of it. But it works. So we can keep that and play around with it. They say that, you know, any animal has enough brains to tan its own hide. You know, and we should be so intelligent as to do that. So there's all this good organ fat on this animal. We want to keep that fat. That's good. Generally, rabbits are really lean meat. So if you're making a soup, like we're going to make tonight, you want the fat. It makes a good broth. It's delicious. Good for you. So, you know, I should have like some sort of container.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask Aaron. Oh, you're gonna do it for everyone? Okay.
To put this fat in. And, you know, we've sequestered the poop and the pee way down below the hide. So now we can play around inside and we're not going to worry about the meat getting contaminated.
Are you still planning on doing 2 rabbits so that people can be more participating in the second one?
Yes,
Okay.
I would like if you all want to do that. We're pretty much wrapped up here. Like, I'm just going to take the fat, make sure that that gets stored away, rip the organs out, and then take the hairy feet off and put all of that into a pot, and we're just gonna crock them with it. And this will be the rabbit that we use tonight for food, right, for dinner. Rabbit's really great because they're like a meal size for a large family. One big rabbit like this is a good amount of food for a family of 4 or 5.
There's not a lot left over that you have to try to refrigerate or anything.
Right.
Yeah.
So when you're dealing with like a homestaying situation, you want to be as rugged and simple as possible. Butchering for the table is the way to go. That's how people did it for a long time. Right? And so even when they had large animals, they'd butcher an animal, and all the neighbors would come over and they'd have a barbecue, and they'd all eat it all up really fast, because otherwise there's no other way to store it. Or it's not worth the salt to store it. You could say that. Because that's a primary way to do the stored meat. Otherwise I'm going to put food in there. Okay. So we're just going to take all the fat around the colon and whatnot. It's really great stuff. So we want to take that as much as we can. It's oftentimes pretty tightly bound, but all of these organs are likely going to be fed directly to pigs. The pigs, are omnivores, so are chickens. They'll eat meat, they'll eat raw meat, they'll eat organs, fat, everything, and they'll make good use out of it.
We'll just crunch through the skull. No problem.
The pigs will eat the entire thing immediately.
Wow.
And thank you for it, yes.
Kidney fat, right? Good. Usually the kidneys and the heart are well padded with fat, so are the intestines. So that's the kidney.
We can separate out
Got a healthy
the bile, but then
Yeah,
the
we
rest
got
of
a
the intestines.
Beautiful, healthy rabbit.
It's-
I'm going to keep the
it's fine.
They'll be good for you. And you go to the other side.
So the bile is in one.
I'm not as
Yes.
familiar with the insides of a rabbit, but I don't see anything abnormal.
Yeah. It doesn't look abnormal. When we
Yeah.
cut into it, we can see and make sure that the nephrotic tissue is nice and symmetrical and beautiful, because it should be. Because healthy things are beautiful. And if they look ugly to you on an intuitive level, there's probably something wrong. That's how we have evolved, right? To see beauty and symmetry.
I think an unhealthy liver is some of the nastiest thing you've ever seen.
It says, do not breed with this individual. Their liver is gross.
I didn't see the reproductive organs. Did I miss it?
They're at the bottom,
Okay.
and they're,
I want to see what the lungs look like too.
yeah, so I'm going to cut the liver off here. This is the rest of the liver. Be careful with the...
Wow.
Yeah, we'll want to separate that
Yeah.
out.
Okay.
I'm going to cut that off eventually.
I think Jonathan might
Wow,
be
this looks
seeing
a
it.
lot like a mouse liver. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
The mouse has these little lobes like this right
So
here.
dark
These
is
two
the
little
bile
lobes that
duct?
go around the stomach. Yeah.
Dogs use it? Is that what you said?
No, he was wondering where the bile was stored.
Yeah, there's a little
The
bladder.
gallbladder.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And then there's a duct that goes into the small intestine, or the doula, I think it's called.
Dola's doula.
And what does it do?
Doula.
What's
Dola's
bile do? I forget.
Digestive
Bile is
enzymes.
Digestive enzymes. So,
Right.
So we
it
don't want
comes
to be
out of the
pre-digesting.
stomach.
Fat digestion.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. And so I remember
so we don't give that to
whose
the pig.
husband- whose
Right.
wife was having gallbladder.
That's a nice liver. Very nice.
All right. And a nice healthy.
Way to go, Dola.
Way to go, Ruben. We got a nice healthy liver here. And kidneys.
That bluish green thing, that's the bile.
Yeah, you gotta be careful with that.
So I usually just cut the part of the liver that's all around it.
You have to be careful because if it broke, it would spoil all the nutrients.
Yeah.
Yep, it's gross. It's really
If you,
bitter.
in my case, when we're doing experiments, we don't want bile all over the liver that we're gonna, because I do transplants. I transplant livers into other mice,
Oh,
so that destroys the liver if you get it on.
If you get digestive enzymes all over
Yeah.
it.
So usually you take this, make sure no one's in your way, and you just throw it away. You don't want it anywhere near stuff. Usually the ravens will find it, or mice will find it, or it'll just decompose. And there you go. Here's the liver. Stick it in there for now.
You can do that in the city, right?
Yeah, throw it in your neighbor's yard. Whatever. You can throw it in a hot composting pile in the center
Nice
of
back
it.
fat right here.
And that would be fine too. Most meat you can hot compost if you are doing composting right, and you put it from the get-go in the center of the pile. You should not have anything left.